Two decorated war heroes sit quietly over pancakes and coffee when a deputy storms in, demanding ID and accusing them of loitering. What happens next will shock you. These veterans didn't just defend themselves, they delivered a masterclass in dignity and the law that left this cop humiliated and the entire county talking. This deputy thought he could intimidate two black men eating breakfast, but he picked the wrong veterans on the wrong day. The bell above Millie's diner door chimed as Deputy Marcus Kane stepped inside, his hand already resting on his radio. At 42, Kane had been patrolling Clarksville for 8 years, and he developed what he called instincts about who belonged where. His eyes swept the diner until they landed on the corner booth, where two black men sat over half-eaten plates of pancakes and eggs. Retired Army Sergeant Darnell Hughes, 61, was mid-sentence about his grandson's baseball game when he noticed the deputy's stare. Beside him, Andre Wallace, 58, a former Marine medic, instinctively straightened in his seat. Both men had survived combat zones. But there was something about the way Kane was looking at them that made the air in the diner feel heavy. "Sir, we're going to need to see some identification," Kane announced, his voice cutting through the morning chatter. The diner fell silent. Forks stopped clinking against plates. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause its gurgling. Darnell set down his coffee cup with deliberate calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I've had reports of suspicious activity," Kane replied, his chest puffing out slightly. "Folks loitering, making other customers uncomfortable." Andre's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "We've been here 30 minutes, eating breakfast. How exactly is that suspicious?" Kane's radio crackled, but he ignored it. "Are you going to produce ID? Or do we have a problem?" But what Kane didn't know was that Andre's phone had been recording the entire exchange, and in 30 seconds, this small-town confrontation would become something much bigger than anyone imagined. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Because tomorrow, at the same time, we'll bring you another story of black people leading the way that you won't want to miss. Darnell leaned back in the booth, his Desert Storm veteran cap casting a shadow over his weathered face. "Officer, with all due respect, what crime do you suspect us of committing?" Kane's face reddened. "I don't need to explain myself to you." "Actually, you do," Andre interjected, his medic training keeping him calm under pressure. "The Fourth Amendment requires reasonable suspicion of criminal activity before you can demand identification." "Don't quote law at me," Kane snapped, taking a step closer to their table. "I know my job." Jolene, the waitress who'd been serving coffee at Millie's for 22 years, appeared at the counter with a pot of coffee, her knuckles white as she gripped the handle. She'd seen men like Kane before. Men who confused authority with power. "These gentlemen have been perfect customers," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "They ordered, they paid, they've been nothing but polite." Kane whirled around. "Nobody asked you, ma'am." That's when Andre did something that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and hit the live stream button on his social media account. Within seconds, the notification went out to his 3,000 followers. "Live, police harassment at Millie's Diner, Clarksville, TN." "What are you doing?" Kane demanded. "Exercising my First Amendment rights," Andre replied calmly. "Unless you're planning to violate those too?" The viewer count on Andre's stream began climbing rapidly. 50, 100, 300 people watching live as this confrontation unfolded in real time. Kane's radio crackled again, this time more urgently. "Unit 47, what's your status?" "Busy," Kane growled into his radio, but his eyes were fixed on Andre's phone. The live stream comments were flooding in. People from across the country were now watching two veterans being harassed for eating pancakes. "Officer Kane," Darnell said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd led soldiers in combat. "I served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. My friend here saved lives as a Marine medic. We didn't fight for our country to be treated like criminals in our own hometown." "I don't care about your service," Kane shot back. But his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The live stream had reached 1,200 viewers, and the comments were brutal. People were sharing the stream, tagging local news stations, and demanding answers. Andre kept his phone steady, making sure the camera captured Kane's face clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen watching, this is Deputy Marcus Kane, Badge number 147. Harassing two veterans at Millie's Diner for the crime of eating breakfast while black. Turn that thing off. Kane lunged for the phone, but Andre was quicker, pulling it back. That would be assault, deputy, Andre said. And now you've got 2,000 witnesses. Jolene had moved to the window, and what she saw made her gasp. Cars were pulling into the parking lot. Not police cars, civilian vehicles. People were driving to the diner, drawn by the live stream. Some carried signs, others just their phones. But they were coming. Kane's radio erupted. Unit 47, Lieutenant Morrison en route to your location. Stand down and await backup. But it was too late. The story had taken on a life of its own. The diner door burst open as Lieutenant Sarah Morrison strode in, her face grim. At 35, she'd risen through the ranks quickly, partly due to her ability to diffuse situations that other officers escalated. She took one look at the scene, Kane standing over two older black men, one holding a phone with a live stream reaching 3,500 viewers, and knew this was about to become a department nightmare. Deputy Kane, step back, she ordered. Kane hesitated, his pride warring with his training. Lieutenant, these men were… I said step back. Morrison's voice brooked no argument. She approached the booth with her hands visible, her posture non-threatening. Gentlemen, I'm Lieutenant Morrison. I apologize for this disruption. Could you tell me what happened? Darnell gestured to the live stream. It's all recorded, Lieutenant. Your deputy demanded our ID without probable cause, accused us of loitering, and when we explained our rights, he attempted to grab my friend's phone. Morrison's heart sank. She could see the comments scrolling past on Andre's phone. Fire this cop. Lawsuit, national news. This wasn't just a local incident anymore. It was viral. Officer Kane, she said, her voice carefully controlled. What criminal activity did you observe? Kane's mouth opened and closed like a fish. There were reports. What reports? From whom? The silence stretched uncomfortable. Through the window, Morrison could see the growing crowd outside. Local news vans were pulling up. This was spiraling beyond containment. Andre finally spoke. Lieutenant, we appreciate your professionalism. But this isn't about one bad deputy. This is about a system that allows men like him to harass citizens without consequence. The live stream had reached 5,000 viewers. Comments poured in from veterans, civil rights groups, and ordinary citizens outraged by what they were witnessing. Morrison knew she had seconds to prevent this from becoming a national incident. Deputy Kane, you're relieved of duty pending investigation, Morrison announced. Return to the station immediately. Kane's face went white. You can't be serious. Over these two… That's enough. Morrison's voice cut like a blade. Leave, now. As Kane stumbled toward the door, his career effectively over, Andre continued streaming. The crowd outside had grown to over 50 people, many holding signs reading "Veterans deserve respect" and "Justice for Darnell and Andre." This is incredible, Andre said to his phone. We came for pancakes and coffee, and now we're witnessing history. Morrison sat down across from the two veterans, her movements deliberate and respectful. Gentlemen, I want to make this right. What Deputy Kane did was wrong, illegal, and goes against everything we're supposed to stand for. Darnell studied her face. What are you proposing, Lieutenant? Full investigation. Kane will be terminated. And… Morrison paused, knowing her next words would define her career. I want to invite you both to speak at our next community meeting. Help us do better. The live stream exploded with comments. 7,000 viewers watched, as two veterans who'd been harassed moments before were now being asked to help reform the very department that had wronged them. But Andre wasn't finished. Lieutenant, with respect, we need more than promises. We need accountability. We need training. We need policies that prevent this from happening to the next black man who just wants to eat breakfast in peace. Outside, a news reporter was setting up for a live broadcast. The story was breaking on social media faster than anyone could contain it. Millie's Diner incident was trending nationally. Morrison nodded slowly. You're right. What do you need from us? What happened next would shock the entire county. Sheriff Robert Coleman arrived at Millie's Diner to find a crowd of over 100 people, news crews from 3 stations, and a live stream that had reached 12,000 viewers. He'd been sheriff for 15 years, and he'd never seen anything like this. Inside, he found his lieutenant sitting across from two veterans who, instead of demanding retribution, were calmly discussing police reform. "Sheriff Coleman," Morrison said, standing, "I need to brief you on—" "I've been watching the live stream," Coleman interrupted. "The whole county has." He approached the booth, his hat in his hands. "Mr. Hughes, Mr. Wallace, I owe you an apology. What happened here today is unacceptable." Darnell looked up at the sheriff, then at the phone still streaming live. "Sheriff, we don't want just an apology. We want change." "What kind of change?" Andre leaned forward. "Mandatory bias training for all officers. Community oversight board. And we want to work with you to create a protocol that prevents this from happening again." The livestream comments were unanimous. These veterans were turning their humiliation into an opportunity for justice. Sheriff Coleman nodded slowly. "You have my word." "Words aren't enough," Andre said, his medic training making him direct. "We want it in writing, tonight, at a public meeting, with the whole community watching." Through the window they could see the crowd growing. People were driving from neighboring counties. This small-town incident had become a movement. "There's something else," Darnell added. "Deputy Kane needs help, not just punishment. What he did was wrong, but destroying his life won't fix the problem." The sheriff's eyes widened. These men, who had every right to demand Kane's head, were showing mercy. "We want him in sensitivity training," Andre continued. "We want him to understand what he did wrong, and if he's willing to learn, we want him to be part of the solution." The livestream had reached 15,000 viewers. Comments flooded in from around the world, praising the veterans' grace under pressure. But the biggest surprise was still coming. By 6 p.m., the Clarksville Community Center was packed. The emergency town hall, called in response to the diner incident, had drawn over 300 people. Andre's livestream, now with 25,000 concurrent viewers, showed the entire proceeding. Sheriff Coleman stood at the podium, visibly shaken. "Today, I failed this community. Deputy Kane's actions do not represent our values, and changes start immediately." He announced Kane's termination, the formation of a community oversight board, and mandatory bias training for all officers. But what happened next surprised everyone. Deputy Marcus Kane, red-eyed and humble, approached the microphone. "I want to apologize to Mr. Hughes and Mr. Wallace. What I did was wrong. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I'm ashamed." The crowd stirred, but Darnell stood up. "Deputy Kane, we accept your apology. But apologies without action are meaningless. Are you willing to do the work to change?" Kane nodded, tears in his eyes. "Yes, sir. I want to be better." What followed was unprecedented. The two veterans, who had been harassed hours earlier, stood with their harasser and outlined a comprehensive reform plan. They created a citizen review board, implemented body cameras, and established a community policing program. The livestream reached 40,000 viewers. As Andre delivered his closing statement, "This is how change happens. Not through violence or hatred, but through dignity, courage, and the willingness to turn pain into purpose." 6 months later, the Clarksville Police Department became a model for community policing. Deputy Kane, after extensive training and therapy, became one of the department's most effective community liaisons. And every morning at Millie's Diner, two veterans still meet for coffee and pancakes, knowing they helped change not just their town, but showed the world what real strength looks like. The live stream that started with harassment ended with hope. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't anger, it's the quiet dignity of men who refuse to let hate win. Their lesson was clear. When faced with bullies, the strongest response isn't to become one yourself, but to stand firm in your principles and demand better from everyone around you. Deputy Kane learned that day that respect isn't taken, and two veterans showed an entire nation what earned respect looks like. 3 weeks after the town hall, the story was still making waves. Andre's original livestream had been viewed over 2 million times, and the Young Millie's Diner incident hashtag had sparked conversations about police accountability across the country. But the real change was happening right in Clarksville. Darnell pushed through the doors of the police station, carrying a box of donuts from Millie's Diner. It had become his weekly tradition. Every Wednesday at 3 p.m., he'd stop by with treats for the officers and spend an hour in informal conversation. Today, he found Deputy Kane at his desk, reviewing community policing protocols. "Morning, Marcus," Darnell said, setting the box down. The use of Kane's first name still felt strange to both men, but it was part of the healing process. Kane looked up, a genuine smile replacing the defensive scowl that had once defined his face. "Mr. Hughes, you didn't have to." Darnell, the veteran, corrected gently. "We've been through this." Over the past weeks, Kane had undergone intensive bias training, attended community listening sessions, and worked directly with Andre and Darnell to understand the impact of his actions. The transformation wasn't complete, it would take years, but the foundation was solid. "I had a call yesterday," Kane said, pulling out a chair for Darnell. A black teenager, maybe 16, was riding his bike through Riverside Heights. "Normally I might have, well, you know what I might have done." Darnell nodded, waiting. "Instead, I remembered what you taught me about assumptions. I stopped, introduced myself, and asked if he was okay. Turns out he was delivering medicine to his grandmother who couldn't drive. We talked for 10 minutes about his college plans." Kane paused, emotion catching in his throat. "He thanked me for being kind. When's the last time anyone thanked me for being kind?" This was the work that didn't make headlines. The quiet, daily choice to see humanity instead of suspicion. To protect and serve instead of intimidate and control. Meanwhile, Andre was fielding calls from news producers, podcasters, and documentary filmmakers. Everyone wanted the story of the veterans who turned harassment into hope. CNN had offered him a segment, and Netflix was interested in a documentary. But Andre was selective about which platforms he chose. "We're not here to get famous," he told Darnell during their Thursday morning breakfast at Millie's. "We're here to make change." Jolene refilled their coffee cups, her movements more relaxed now. The constant media attention had initially stressed her, but she'd grown to appreciate the positive changes it brought. Business was booming, and more importantly, the diner had become a symbol of unity. "Y'all have changed this whole town," she said, pride evident in her voice. "My daughter's teacher is using your story in her civics class. Kids are learning about their rights and responsibilities." Andre smiled. "That's the point. Education prevents the next incident." Their conversation was interrupted by a young woman approaching their table. She was maybe 25, nervous but determined. "Excuse me, are you Andre Wallace and Darnell Hughes?" When they nodded, she continued. "I'm Sarah Chen, a law student at Vanderbilt. I'm writing my thesis on community policing reform, and I wanted to thank you. Your live stream inspired my research." This happened regularly now. Students, activists, and ordinary citizens sought them out, wanting to learn from their example. Andre and Darnell had become reluctant symbols of dignity under pressure. "What's your thesis about?" Darnell asked, gesturing for her to sit. "How viral moments can create sustainable change instead of just temporary outrage. Most incidents like yours flame out after a few weeks, but you've created something lasting." Andre nodded thoughtfully. "Because we focused on solutions, not just problems. Anger gets attention, but solutions get results." The most surprising development came from an unexpected source. Officer Rebecca Martinez, a 5-year veteran of the Clarksville Police Department, approached Andre after a community meeting. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was in the patrol car outside Millie's that morning. I heard Kane's radio calls, and I knew something was wrong. But I didn't come in to stop it." Andre studied her face, seeing the guilt etched in her features. "Why not?" "Because I was scared. Scared of confronting a senior officer, scared of being labeled a troublemaker. I let my fear override my duty." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been a coward, and I'm done with that." This confession led to one of the most important developments in the reform process. Martinez became the first officer to join the Community Accountability Board, providing an insider's perspective on police culture. Her courage to speak up encouraged other officers to come forward with their own stories of witnessing misconduct without intervening. "Fear is the enemy of justice," Darnell told her during one of their private conversations. "But courage is contagious. You speaking up gives others permission to do the same." Martinez nodded. understanding that real change required allies within the system, not just critics outside it. By the 2-month mark, the Clarksville model was being studied by police departments nationwide. The combination of community oversight, mandatory bias training, and veteran-led mediation had reduced complaints by 70% and improved police-community relations dramatically. Andre found himself on a conference call with the mayor of Memphis, the police chief of Nashville, and representatives from the Department of Justice. They wanted to implement similar programs in their cities. The key, Andre explained, is that reform has to be collaborative, not punitive. We didn't set out to destroy careers, we set out to save them. And in the process, we saved our community. The success in Clarksville had attracted national attention for all the right reasons. The town that had once been known for a viral police harassment incident was now famous for its innovative approach to justice and reconciliation. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Tennessee chapter of the NAACP invited Andre and Darnell to speak at their annual banquet. The theme was Dignity Under Fire, how two veterans changed the conversation. Standing before an audience of 500 people, Darnell reflected on how far they'd come. We didn't plan to become activists that morning. We just wanted pancakes and coffee. But sometimes history chooses you, and you have to decide whether to rise to the moment or let it pass. Andre added, the real heroes aren't the ones who never get knocked down. They're the ones who get back up and help others stand with them. The applause was thunderous, but what moved them most were the young faces in the audience, teenagers and college students, who saw in their story a roadmap for creating change without creating chaos. 6 months after the incident, Millie's Diner was busier than ever. The morning crowd had grown to include police officers, community leaders, and visitors from across the country who wanted to see where the Clarksville miracle had begun. Andre and Darnell still met every Thursday for breakfast, but now they were often joined by others. Deputy Kane had become a regular, along with Lieutenant Morrison, Officer Martinez, and various community members who'd been inspired by their example. The corner booth, where everything started, had been marked with a small plaque. Where change began, May 15, 2024. But the real memorial wasn't in bronze, it was in the relationships that had been built and the lives that had been changed. You know what I learned? Kane said one morning, stirring sugar into his coffee. Power isn't about making people afraid of you, it's about making them feel safe around you. Darnell nodded approvingly. Now you're getting it. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. A tour bus was pulling up, the third one this week. Visitors from Atlanta, here to learn about community policing reform, were taking photos and asking questions. Sometimes I wonder if we've created a monster, Andre mused, watching the tourists through the window. Better a monster of hope than a monster of hate? Darnell replied. As they finished their breakfast, both men reflected on the journey. They'd started as victims of harassment and become architects of change. Their story had proven that dignity, courage, and a willingness to extend grace to your enemies could transform not just individuals, but entire communities. The live stream that began with 2 veterans being harassed for eating pancakes had become a masterclass in turning pain into purpose. And in a small diner in Clarksville, Tennessee, they'd shown the world that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't anger. It's the quiet strength of people who refuse to let hate have the last word. Their legacy would live on in every officer who chose compassion over control, every citizen who stood up for what was right, and every community that chose healing over hatred. The lesson of Millie's Diner wasn't just about police reform. It was about the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change when they refused to accept the unacceptable. The bell above the door chimed as they left, just as it had on that fateful morning 6 months ago. But now it rang with the sound of hope, justice, and the promise that tomorrow could be better than today.